Hey, and welcome back to the Dive into the Psalms podcast. My name is Brett Parker. I'm filling in for Craig Cunningham, who filled in for Marion Clifton last week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm Craig Cunningham. I'm filling in for Marion Clifton, who was filling in for Brett Parker last week.
It was just a lot funnier to us, I guess. But no, I'm Brett Parker. This is Craig Cunningham, and we are here to bring you the 8th edition of Dive into the Psalms with Psalm 121. That's that's the one Craig covered in the service this past Sunday. Did an awesome job bringing the message. And so we're going to dive deeper. We are now officially in the 5th book of the Psalms. So Psalms is divided into the 5 books there, and this is the last book. And Psalm 121 is a part of another special group of Psalms. So you want to dive into a little bit of the background there, Craig?
Yeah, absolutely. So these chapters 120 through 124, they're called the Songs of Ascent. And the idea is Israelites were on their way to Jerusalem, and these were sort of the songs that they would sing ascending up the mountain. So kind of where it gets its name. And it's just some it was their road trip playlist. As if you listen to the service this past week, you got a special treat with getting to hear a bunch of fun road trip songs. So we decided to tie that in with the fact that these were their playlist, their road trip playlist. So
I mean, in a lot of ways, because they would travel to Jerusalem a couple times a year for the festivals, for Passover, and so this was almost like a vacation, right? They're traveling, they're together with their families, with their clans. They're headed to this destination where they're going to have a great time worshiping with God's people, being in the temple. But this was kind of a part of their road jams, I guess, on the way.
Oh yeah, you gotta have a good playlist when you're going down the road. Helps the trip go a lot better.
Absolutely. So Psalm 121 is a Song of Ascent, but specifically, any more background there before we dive in? Do we know who wrote this psalm?
Yeah. So based on some of our reading, we believe it was David who wrote it, and it's often called either the soldier psalm or the traveler psalm, and just kind of indicating that maybe David wrote it when he was in battle, and as sort of a thinking about like having a covering over his head. So that was kind of what we understand is kind of the authorship of it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, without further ado, why don't we jump in? We will read the psalm. It's 6 verses in Psalm 121. No, I'm sorry, 8 verses. 8 verses. Want to make sure we cover all those, and then we'll dive right in. So Psalm 121 starts out, it says, "I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore."
Awesome. Thank you for reading that. And some of the things we want to talk about is just kind of the correlation of that time, and then how it applies to our life. So throughout this psalm, it's as we mentioned, they're on their road trip, if you will. They're traveling. So the fact is they're traveling up a mountain. From what I understand, it's supposed to take roughly 3 to 5 days, which
depending on where they were coming from.
Exactly, yeah. So that can be pretty grueling. If you know anybody who's done the Appalachian Trail, I know a few, and that goes for much longer than I could not imagine doing that.
I'll tell you what, man, I get winded after a couple flights of stairs.
Exactly. So. Yeah, we. If you need any partners for the Appalachian Trail, don't call us. Please don't call
Yeah,
us.
it won't be a long trip for
Right.
sure.
So obviously the idea of it being a physical game is hard enough already. But yeah, there's just many dangers that can come with just the physical traveling. You can think about just the fact that they're on some rough terrain. There could be some injury that happens. Maybe you slip on something. But also there was the threat of wild animals. If you've ever been to the Smoky Mountains, as I mentioned in my sermon, you might see a black bear or two, or you might see some other animal, maybe a bobcat or something. But the threat of wild animals is certainly grueling when you're out on a journey. But also, and I think you had maybe some more thoughts on this, but just the fact that there could be just some unsuspecting robbers from, or just thieves from
Yeah.
around the corner.
Yeah, I mean, so Jerusalem, yeah, is on a mountain in this mountain range, and so the topography and terrain is, very hilly, rocky. I mean, the author says, "I lift up my eyes to the hills." They're right there in front of them. To get to Jerusalem, a lot of windy, hilly roads, places where people can hide and pounce on unsuspecting victims. The story that Jesus tells, which we know is the parable of the Good Samaritan, Jesus doesn't actually say it's a parable. The gospel account doesn't say, well, then Jesus told this parable. Jesus just starts telling this story, and he starts it out by saying there was a man on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, and everybody knew when they heard that story, like that's a road you don't go on. Like that's a dangerous part of town. And so you don't travel that road alone. And so the Jews ascending, toward Jerusalem to go worship, they would have been traveling in caravans, making sure they were together, because there were a lot of the wild animals for sure, but the bigger threat was people waiting to rob you, take your stuff or take your life, if you're not careful. And so it was a very real danger,
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and even we're close to Cincinnati, so if you think of Cincinnati, or maybe if you're close to kind of a larger city, if you think about maybe being in a rough part of town at the wee hours of the night, that can be a similar situation to these days. But yeah, so you had the physical side of it, and some of the parallels that we can sort of take away from it is just life's journey in general. I think about sometimes just being in, if I'm just say living life and there are times when I don't know if something is going to happen in my life that and just living life as normal, and you take a corner, and before you know it, you get just hit with something really hard, emotional or something. And something I think about with that, just in my personal life, was going on I think almost 2 years now. Yeah, almost 2 years ago. Just hanging out at home one day, and then I get a phone call out of nowhere. It's a seemingly normal day, but just get a phone call that my grandma had been found dead. And I'll tell you, that's one of those moments that I was not expecting. My grandma was 77 years old, and I didn't really think about the fact that, hey, she might, something could happen. She might die soon. Something like that just did not click with me, or it wasn't in my mind at the time. So when it happened, I was kind of completely sidelined. I was really beside myself, and I just didn't really know what to do. And it was just in those moments, it can be hard when you're just journeying through life in general, just in some uncharted territory, whether it be grief, whether it just be something else emotional, especially. Life can be pretty grueling, and sometimes just feel very hard to navigate through.
Absolutely, yeah. And
At
I would
times.
say for us, as especially American Christians who enjoy a lot of freedom. We don't experience persecution like many of our brothers and sisters around the world.
Right.
That might be more of the troubles that we face in our culture, in our time, is just those things that come out of nowhere and wreck you or shake you emotionally. And how do you navigate, or who do you look to for help in those times when something unexpected, when something, comes out from around a corner out of nowhere? What do you do? And I think that's what this psalmist is trying to help us do, help us navigate those times in life when that happens.
Right. And I think it was verse 3 that says, he and you can correct me, I think you have it in front of you. I think it says he will not let your foot be moved.
Yep.
And that can also translate to as to not to stumble. I think you even said when we were talking that it will preserve you. Is that right? Was that?
Yeah. So that word in the later part of that verse, he says, "He who keeps you." It's talking about God being someone who watches over you. The root of that word can be watch or keep or preserve. Basically, keep you from falling apart or deteriorating in those moments when you're not prepared.
Right.
When you get the phone call with the bad news, or you get the diagnosis, or you experience physical danger or pain and suffering, the moments that just seem to rock your world.
Right.
God is there preserving you, protecting you. Another translation, instead of saying the Lord is your keeper or he keeps you, it says he's your protector. And so, that idea that he's not letting your foot slip is the idea that God is the most stable, firm foundation you can have your life on. And yes, these people in this psalm, they're singing it, they're traveling toward Jerusalem, but Jerusalem might be the goal or their destination of this journey, but they understand that God is really the end goal, that God is the center, he's the foundation. Even though they're singing this while they're standing on a mountain, which is probably the most solid foundation any of us could think of physically on the physical earth, what they're admitting in this moment is that God is even a stronger, more firm foundation than that to build your life on.
Right, for sure. Yeah, and that's just good words to live by, especially because even when I had the troubling time with my grandmother, it gave me comfort knowing that at one point she had given her life to Christ. She had become a Christian. So I at that point I know she had hope, and it gave me hope knowing that that she was up in heaven. So in those times it gave me a bit of comfort, even when. And I went through the different stages of grief and wondering why did this happen, but then I was assured that she was taken care of, her soul was kept, and that she's up in heaven. So just good, definitely good things to hold on to, especially in those moments where it feels really dark.
Yeah.
Especially there for a little bit, but it gives reassurance in those times, and just being able to just study the Word and root ourselves and root myself in the Word will help us through any of those troubling times in our life. Yeah, especially if we come around a corner and something hits us just way out of left field, we can stand strong on our foundation.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, the Lord and God's Word, it helps orient us when something has knocked us down, or when we're confused, or again, something comes out of nowhere and just turns your life upside down and you're not sure where it is, or you just described kind of feeling like you're in the dark, having something to hold on to, right? For instance, like if you're doing some hiking and you're going up a mountain, a lot of times you might see on trails there's literally like a rope or a rail that you can hold on to in some places, right? And it helps you just keep your footing. And that's the idea that the author's getting here is, when you build your life on God, when He is the foundation, and your relationship with Christ is what you stand on, your foot will not slip, even when you're in the middle of those dark, crazy, scary moments.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Speaking of darkness, though, I know you went into verse 6 a little bit more extensively on Sunday in your message. But, it says, the sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. Can you go into a little bit more depth of what the author may have meant by that phrase there?
Yeah, and I do think that one of the things I talked about was just by day at that time it was from at least from my understanding it was just the different trials that come by day, especially if you're traveling in the beating sun, is you might encounter some maybe just dehydration or just being worn out from being in the sun all day, or even sunburn, sun poisoning. So just some of those different things that can come with that, but also just the fact that that God is able to take care of us through the different times in our life, whether it's day or night. He's not sleeping like how we would need sleep at some point. Thankfully, He does not. And I mentioned this on Sunday as well, but in some of my reading, it kind of astonished me that some of the pagan gods were, or it would talk about that they would be awoken from a slumber, which signifies to me that obviously at some time they got to sleep. But thankfully, God is not like that.
Right.
He does not require sleep. And maybe those of you who have been Christians for a long time, you know that. But if you're a newer Christian, it's reassuring knowing that He constantly, whether it's day or night, in our comings and goings, He is always watching over us. And I believe that the devil is watching just as closely. Satan is watching just as closely as God is. But the fact is that God ain't sleeping, and He's taking care of us.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about it, anything that can happen to you is either going to happen during the day, or it's going to happen at night. And so what the psalmist does here is kind of covers all the bases, right? Like anything that could possibly happen to you from sunup to sundown, middle of the night, God is watching over you. He's protecting you. It talks about, He's your keeper. He's the shade on your right hand. God is literally enveloping us just from all sides and protecting us from anything. And it doesn't mean that nothing will happen to us. I mean, we're all going to go through trials. We're all going to have things that just, blindside us and, just really, really, like we said, turn our world upside down. But of anything that can happen to us on planet Earth in this life, God is right there. He's not. He's never like, oh, sorry, I turned my back for a second. I missed that one. He's always watching us. He's always protecting and preserving us. So
right. And I think you had a sermon on it about, might have been a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. The time goes by fast, so it's hard to remember. But about some of these cliche sayings, like when people would say, "Oh, God won't give you more than you can handle." Well, that's not entirely true, because as you've probably, or as any of us have probably known in our life, there are things that are extremely hard to handle, especially if we are trying to do it on our own. But the fact is that we give it to Him, and because He's going to give us more than we can handle at times, and that just gives us more motivation. That we should give those things to Him, that we should rely on Him.
absolutely.
When things are good, when things are bad, but especially when things feel too heavy.
Yeah, I think the psalmist here obviously had been through some things in his life that led him to the conclusion, where does my help come from? Oh, it comes from the Lord, who made all this anyways, right? So if his belief was still like, the world is all made up of fluffy clouds and marshmallows, then he could have easily come to the conclusion, hey, where does my help come from? Me. Like I'm the captain of my life. I'm in charge. I'm the only one I can rely on. But clearly, God had allowed him to go through some things that brought him to that point of surrender, where he could say, "Oh no, my help comes from the Lord. Like that's the only way I'll get through some things." So, yeah, no, God definitely allows me to go through things that I cannot handle on my own, and He allows that to happen so that I will surrender, so that I'll trust in Him and just come to that point of complete reliance on Him.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think that's just about. I think all I've got, unless you had anything else.
Well, I just the verse 8 where he ends with saying, "The Lord will keep your going out and coming in from this time forth forevermore." Similar to verse 6 where he says, "Anything that can happen to you under the sun or the moon, Lord will protect you from it." He also ends with this thought that God is with you. He's preserving you. He's watching over you from beginning to end. From going out. This came across this quote by Charles Spurgeon, and he said, going out, referring to, hey, I'm a youth. I'm young. I'm going out into the world. I got my whole life ahead of me. To now coming back in. I'm bringing it home, basically. Like I have few days left in my life. Basically, the idea of just from the beginning of your life to the end of your life, God is always there. And like you mentioned, just the hope that you feel when your life is built on Christ, just such a powerful statement there that I can have hope no matter what happens because God has promised that He is with me always. Like there's never going to be a time when He's not watching over me, when He's not, helping to preserve me, even when I'm facing a situation where I'm just crumbling and falling apart. God is right there, and specifically from right now to forevermore, right? So that's very comforting, very hopeful, powerful statement, and I love it.
For sure. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of weight in these 8 verses, but definitely in a good way. Just reassuring us that through our many life journeys, that when things are tough, things are hard, when things are good, that He's always going to be there no matter what. He's not nodding off for a couple minutes, missing something. He's always there. There's always a reason why something is happening in our life, especially if we just need to learn to put our trust and our hope in Him. And those are just some useful nuggets from these 8 verses here. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Amen, brother. Well, if you are in the Brown County area and you're looking for a church home, we would love to have you on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. Make sure to check us out online, all of our social media platforms. Thanks for stopping by this week. And next week, we're going to actually conclude this 9-week limited series, dive into the Psalms, and we're going to look at the very last Psalm, Psalm 150. So we will look forward to a great time there. But otherwise, we'll see you next week.
See y'all.